Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to paint our girl snowman. Thank you. You guys inspire me so much. Never thought about creating a girl snowman for our handsome guy. So here we are. She's so cute. I will put the drawing for you in the community post, so you can copy that if you'd like. So I put a beanie on her, and we'll make her in a little bit lighter, softer colors, maybe some blush pinks. I shared with you the other day, I kind of created some of these vintagey, blushy type of rose colors and pink colors that I think will be really pretty for her. So let's just go through our supplies real quick. This is my Meeden paper, my Meeden 100% cotton paper. Here's a picture of it, and I am using the cold press. This is a 12 by 9 sheet, 300 GSM, 100% cotton, acid-free. I love it. I love this paper. So you know I love my Artisto. That's a great beginner paper. I feel like looks-wise, it would look very similar to this. This is just a tiny level up, maybe mid-level before arches. Although, honestly, I've had just as good as luck with this as my arches. That's just me. You may have a different experience with this. So I'll list that for you. I'll get the Amazon link for you and I'll list that. But I've really been happy with it. It holds up to water a lot. So if you have your Artisto 9x12s, that's absolutely wonderful as well. The Artisto is real thick. I'm going to be using my MeiLang paints, which you know, great paint for every day. I can't afford to paint with Winsor Newton every day. And lots of beautiful colors. They're very creamy. They're very rich. I love them. They've been really great. A few of you have asked about what happens when you use one up. I just took one of my tubes and filled it up. So those are Paul Rubens paints, really good quality. Make sure you have your wash water and your rinse water, really important in watercolors. You want to make sure you're washing all the paint out of your brush and then give it a good rinse before you go to your next color. This just happens to be again, this is Meeden. I bought this on Amazon, love it. Because if you've ever dumped your water, you know what a nightmare, and it's just quality. And then I've got my palette here. I'll list all of this in the description for you below. If you want any of it, I typically get everything from Amazon. All right, as far as my brush today, I think what I'm going to use, let's see here. Let me find my Princeton. As you know, my Princeton 8 is always kind of my favorite. So I think I'll use that. That Velvet Touch has such a great feel. It's the 8 round, kind of my go-to, and I think it'll be the perfect size for here. I'm going to be using a lot of wet and wet. I've already sprayed my paints to get them activated so they're ready to go. And again, I've got this little color chart of paints that I kind of played with last night, and I'll be using them. So they're going to be a combination of the MeiLang Rose Madder, the, let's see, what's their other color called? Rose Madder and Rose Red. I think those are really pretty, and it'll be perfect for her. And then the Sky Blue which let me show you on here. Love that Sky Blue for the snowy parts of her. I think that will kind of be my go-to. And let's see what happens if I'm going to use for the shadows for our boy snowman. I used kind of a dark grayish color, Payne's Gray, I believe I used. But for her, I think I'm going to go more with maybe a little bit of purpley color. Let's just see. I think that could make a pretty shadow color and maybe just a little bit more feminine. So that'll probably be what I use for the shadows. Yeah, I think I like that. Okay, so let's get started. I want to start with her hat. And I put a little pom-pom on there that will come in later with the darker value and kind of lay over that. So just wetting my brush and going to go into that pinky color, whichever one you choose. whether you're using MeiLangs or an opera rose would be really pretty if you're using your Winsor Newtons. And let's just go in, and I think I'm going to make the shaded part come from the right side. So I'm going to kind of keep that in mind, leave a little lighter values on the left side and a little bit of white space. So let's just go in and start laying down this wash. So this color here is very much like the opera rose, which I love, in Winsor Newton. There we go. And then maybe dab in a little here and there with the darker values. And we're gonna do layers, so no need to worry about that. Now I just washed and rinsed my brush, and I'm gonna lift. So I've got that white spot. Lift some of these because I don't like the hard edges. So I've got this transition. Now I'm gonna let that dry, and let's go into this band. She's got like more of a beanie on. And I'm gonna start laying down a wash, knowing this is my lighter side. And I'm somewhat using the side of my brush to get the thicker brush strokes for her. That side will be a little darker. And then before this gets too dry, I'm going to go in with a damp brush. So wash and rinse my brush, and kind of a lifting, but really what I'm trying to create here is a softening of that line, because a beanie is soft. So I don't really want hard edges. There we go. And now I'm going to let that dry. Now we could go in with a little bit darker around the bottom while it's wet and kind of let that blend. I'm going to soften that edge just like that. Maybe get a little darker over here because that's our shadow side. So we want it to look like there's a little bit of a shadow, darkness on this side, and it kind of pulls your eye over there. Wet and wash my brush and soften that edge. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that alone and let it dry a bit. Now let's go ahead and do her nose. I don't want to do too much up in here because I don't want to have that all spread. So I'm going to go into our cad orange. I guess that's an obvious choice, right? This is actually going to be a mix of, for MeiLang, it's cad orange and a, I believe they call that orange yellow. And we'll go in and just create a little wash, and I'm again leaving some white. And I believe my boy, I put a tiny bit of reddish orange. I'm going to leave hers a little bit lighter. Wash and rinse my brush and let that go, and maybe dab in just a tiny bit with the cad orange, just at the bottom. With his, I did a little bit of a red orange. And then we'll just let that kind of sit. All right. Let's go ahead and do our scarf. So we're going to do the same thing we kind of did up here. It's going to be very washy, so a light value using the side of my brush. And her scarf is a little fluffy, so I'm going to use somewhat softer lines for hers than I did his. His had a little bit more harder lines and creases, because I almost felt like he had a wool scarf on, which hers may be wool. You know, you do what you want. And then I'm going to go in, touching in just to this side over here. This is the beauty of watercolor for me. What I love is letting it flow and blend. Maybe a little bit in here because it's going into this part of the scarf. Now, if you're not getting that bleed, you can always go in, wash and rinse your brush, tap it off, and go in and just lay down a tiny dampness. Just help it blend a little. Tapping in. Now my brush is just damp. I haven't got a ton of water in there. Maybe come around here, add a little bit more in there. I love this color. MeiLiang did really well with that color. There we go. So I'm going to leave that be. Although I always say that, and then look at me, guys. I'm smoothing out some of these lines. I just can't stand those hard lines. Just with a damp brush going in and softening a little. I know. I said I'm done, and then I go back in. Sorry, guys. Okay, let's leave her. Or me. You guys are probably doing fine leaving her. It's me. And I'm going to do the other side over here. So go in with that light wash, meaning I've got more paint. I'm sorry, water than paint. There we go. Just coloring that other side in. Look how cute she is. We could actually do her little eyes too. And for her eyes, I think I will use a Payne's gray because I don't want to use a dark gray. I mean a black. And I'm just going to use the tip of my brush. That's why it's so important to really preserve the tips of your brushes because they come in handy. Now, if this is too hard for some of you because it's a little small and detail-y, you can always color in with a pen or something, or maybe one of your watercolor pencils. You know, do whatever works for you. Adjust and modify. This is just having fun. Nobody's keeping score on you that you're doing it the way I'm doing it. Just kind of make it work for you. I use a pen a lot of times. Matter of fact, for her little eyelashes, that's what I'm going to do. I really could use this tiny little striper brush, fine liner brush from Meeden, but I might just go ahead and pen that in. And she's got these little eyelashes. Isn't that cute? Okay. Let's move on to this part of her scarf. So grabbing that light wash of whatever pink you happen to be using. And we're going to start creating. Now I'm going to stay a little bit away from this because it's a tiny bit wet. And just laying in this wash of color, wet my brush. And if you can think about it, leave a little bit of white space here and there. There we go. Used a damp brush and just pick some of that up. Now I'm just going in with a little bit of color and dropping it in. And then we'll go in after this is finished. And we'll add in the little fringes, the little pom-poms. There we go. So I just dropped in some color here and there. Might drop in a tiny bit more at the top here. Like that. Let that blend. Okay, let's leave that alone. Now let's make her little buttons. I'm going to use, I really like these colors in the MeiLiang palette. It's a sienna and a yellow sienna. I think they're really pretty. They kind of have this orangey-ish feel, but it feels like a cool color to me. And I'm going to just use the side of my brush and go in and create her little buttons. Just like that. And then we'll go in and add a little darker brown to those. And now I think we're dry enough. We can go up into the top and start creating a little bit of shadows. So picking up in MeiLiang, it's a sky blue. In your Winsor Newton, you could use like a cerulean. And just going to add the smallest bit of that purple, and maybe a dash of the Prussian blue to create kind of a shadowy color, but then I want to make it really light in value, so a lot of water to it. Now that doesn't mean when you go to paint you want a ton of water on your brush. It's just the mixture is probably 80 pigment, 20 water. And then I'm going to go in and start creating some of these little shadows on her. So we'll go with the tip of my brush, so anchoring my hand and just a light pressure. Now, if you're at home doing this with me, use to get really the tip. I typically would hold up and down, but I don't want to block your view. So I'm just going to go in here, and as I start moving over to the other side, I'm applying more pressure because I want a wider stroke. Now, right away before that dries, wash and rinse my brush and go right along that line with a damp brush. Just like that. Maybe pick up a tiny bit more of that paint. Dab in. But we can always work layers here. So once this dries, we can come back in and add a little bit more darkness. And there we go. I'm going to soften this paint line here. There we go. Okay, I think I'll leave that. Let's go in and maybe do one under her little scarf. Damp brush, soften that line. Do it again. Damp brush, rinsed, and soften that line. And this is the shadow side, so maybe create a tiny bit of a shadow there on her arm. And here's the inside of her arm, but I'm going to soften all those edges with a damp brush. Just like that. And there you go. Look how cute she is. And she's definitely got a softer quality to her. Now let's go into her pom-pom. And I'm going to use a stronger value, just meaning more paint. Actually, let's do this. Let's put a little wash in the pom-pom, and then we'll bring out the little strands with a darker value. So we'll go into that light value of the pink, and we'll just kind of add some of this. And then we'll go in and really, now these I am going to leave hard lines because for obvious reason, pom-poms, we're going to kind of leave a hard line. I will go in and touch in just in the middle with maybe a darker value. like that. Let it spread. Now we'll leave it. Okay. Let's go in and, oh, you know, there's a little part of her scarf I drew there too. So it's going to be a little darker. Now I have to be careful because that shadow is still a tiny bit wet. So I'll make this a little darker. Maybe add a tiny bit of that purple to it so it looks like it's a little bit in the shadow, or the blue actually. Same shadow I used for her face. There we go. Now that may be a little too much, so maybe we can pick some of that up. There we go. I need to go in here, but I don't want it to run into that wet part. A little bit of the fringes there. There, so that kind of makes it look like it's inside. All right, the one thing I remember we didn't add that we did add on him was those cute little cheeks. So I'm going to go into, I used a pink with a little bit of cad yellow and a little bit of sienna. And I'm just gonna go in and create her little cheeks. They're definitely pinker than his. Now I wanna soften that. So I'm lifting some up, and I also, like we did with his, wet damp brush and soften that edge. Because snow definitely doesn't have hard edges, so that just gives that hint. Now this, it's pretty cold here today, guys, so I can't do her other cheek because it's still a little wet. So I'm gonna have to wait on doing that. But I think what I will do is I'm gonna go in on the rim of this hat and maybe under here and add in some darker values of that pinkish color, meaning I have more paint versus water. And let's just use the side of our brush. I'm scooping up, just like that. Don't really want to get rid of those whites. And now I'll soften those edges, the damp brush. You want to wipe your brush every time you lift, because otherwise you're just moving the paint you just lifted to another area. There we go. She's got a lot of pink, folks. And then maybe we can do that little shadowy look for her nose, because it's casting a bit of a shadow. So very light wash. I forgot I just went on there and wet that, so it's spread a little bit, but that's okay. And then I think I'll add just a tiny bit of that Payne's Gray just to the bottom and let that flow out. Now I can't do her other cheek. I know she looks lopsided, but because that's kind of wet. So let's go in and create a little bit of darkness on that side. So I'm gonna pick up that Payne's Gray, or let's use, let's try the burnt sienna and the sienna. I think that'll make a pretty shadowy color too. I'm gonna add some of that pink to it. Maybe just a touch of the paint. Ooh, see? Looky there what I did. Way too much. That's okay. I'm gonna water it down a bit, and then let's go in and create some shadows here. Maybe pick up that deeper, darker red. And then I will lighten that. Don't want that hard edge. So it's really creating, and you could use other colors for shadows. You don't have to use the colors I'm using, but I was trying to kind of keep it in the pink family there. But you could certainly add in that Payne's gray, and that creates kind of a nice look there. I'm gonna water down a little bit more of that Payne's gray because it's pretty strong, as you saw here. And let's just go into where her hat tucks in, maybe at the top, but let's do here too. And create a little bit of a shadow down around that rim. Yeah. I just love this Payne's gray. It's such a pretty color. Has that blue touch to it. And then softening that edge like that. And there we go. Look how that really gives this illusion of turning. I'm going to go in with a tiny darker value of maybe the cad orange and a tiny bit of that sienna, which also has a lot of orange. And I'm going to touch in a bit on the bottom of her nose. Just like that. Now this is really kind of some fine detail work here. So you don't have to do this part. And boy, it is so wet here. I'm waiting for it to start raining any minute. So it's kind of hard to go in and create that other cheek because my paint is still wet, which shows you how much the weather really does affect your paints. So let's try it, and hopefully it doesn't turn into a big wet mess. It's doing okay. And then I'm just going to soften that edge. Like that. Yeah, it worked out okay. It's a little bit wet, but that's okay. So she's got two cheeks, although it looks like maybe this one's a tiny bit smaller than the other one. Damp brush just to soften that edge. And there we go. So she's got two cheeks now. All right. And let's go in and create, well, this is still wet, so I don't want to go in there too much. Where else can we create a little bit of shadow? Let's pick up a little bit of a dark value, meaning a little bit more pigment, and go in around this bottom edge. Using the side of my brush. And now I'm going to go in and soften all these lines. So I'm just picking up, kind of lifting off, and there, it gives us that little bit of, looks like there's some depth in there. There we go. Okay. I think she looks pretty happy and good. Let's create some glazes on her little scarf. So I go in and I pick up a little darker value, meaning more pigment, and I'm just gonna go in and create with the side of my brush. Like that. Now over here, I wanna keep it a little bit light because that's the side that has maybe some light on her. And now I go in and I can soften some of those edges. Tapping off, lift and tap. And certainly if you don't mind those hard edges, you know, keep them in there. This is your painting. There we go. It's not bad, it's just preference, what you like. And use just a tiny touch of that same color I used up here, maybe as the shadow on the side. I want to make sure my brush doesn't have too much water when I go in here because that's already wet. So dabbing off my brush and then just touching in and let it spread on its own. But when you go wet and wet, you want to make sure you don't go in with too much water on your brush, or it'll kind of go crazy. So after I pick up my paint, I'm tapping off. And then I go in and lay it down and just let it spread. Just like that. Let's go and we'll just barely darken the other side under here. This is where glazing comes in so useful. Don't want to get that side too dark because I was trying to give the impression the light was coming on that side. Lift and tap. Lift and tap. Okay. Put a few glazes on her scarf here. Using the side of my brush. And then I'll soften those. Trying to preserve some of those whites. Don't want to get rid of all of those. There we go. She looks very pretty. Let's go in with a dark value and use the tip of our brush, and we're going to start creating these little pom-pom fronds. So just little swooshes and swirls. And again, you could even use your color pencils for this part. Use whatever you like to use. Might go in one more time on this and create just a little bit more, but I think that's pretty good. And we can do our little fringe at the bottom here. So picking up some of that paint, darker value, and just using light pressure, the tip of my brush, and create her little frillies, little fringes. I envision she probably made this little scarf even. There you go. Now that was some awfully dark color I just put in there, so I may go in and just lift a little bit of that out. At least soften the edge. There you go. There. We could add in a little bit of that darker color up at the top. All right, I think we're doing good here. I'm going to make that look like it's underneath. And we'll add just a little bit of shadowing on those little buttons. So I just grabbed a dark brown. And we'll add that over here on this side. There we go. And I think we're almost done. I could use my little micron pen. Make sure whatever pen you do use is obviously waterproof. And create her little lashes. There we go. And we could go in gosh, it's so cold here. It just is really, you got to give your painting some time to dry. And I'm just going to go in and darken some of that under her rim so that it looks like a shadow. Spreading out my brush a little as I get over to the side. And then going along the edge of that. There we go. Just tapping in while that's wet and kind of letting it spread on its own. And I do have her other arm drawn over here. Let's just kind of define that. But she really, that side is the lighter side. So I didn't want to add too much color over there, but that's good. And then I think last time we did just underneath the buttons a bit. Just like that. So I think she's, oh, you know what? We forgot her little mouth. So I think I used little dots for his mouth. And again, these could even be done with a pen if this is, you know, your hand's not so steady. You can definitely use a pen. But I'm just using the tip of my 8-round Princeton brush. I'm a little nervous to go in there. It might still be a little wet, so I'll go in after she's all dry and do that. Now, we could even go a little bit farther. I'm not sure how long I've been painting now, but go in just to the rim and darken that a bit. Just create a little bit of shadowing up here. Like that, and then I'll soften that edge. There we go. Just kind of makes it look like it's tucked in. And I mean, you could keep adding these layers. Now, I don't want to go in there because that's wet. Maybe just the tip of my brush and adding in some of these little folds in her beanie. Really, you could do as much detail as you like. I'm not a real big detail person, so I don't tend to do that a lot. But you could add in a little here and there for sure. Now, I don't like that line, so I'm going to lift that out. And the last thing I said, we were going to go in and do just a few more little pieces here, not too much, and really use that light touch. And that way now we've got 3 different values in that little pom-pom. We've got the lightest wash we started with, then it got darker, and then I used my darkest value. So hopefully the shadow is dry. Just going in to create a little bit more of that shadow. Maybe up here. So this color I'm using right now, I picked up some of that sienna and the red mixed together. Damp brush. Blend that line. Now this is where you got to be careful because, especially me, I can overwork a painting. It's looking really good, and then I can go in and start adding too much. So make sure and stop yourself. Determine that for what's best for you. I love working with layers, so I like to get darker and darker. And as you've probably noticed with watercolors, they start out darker on the paper, and then they can get, when they dry, they get lighter. So we might, I think on our other little guy, we actually even added in some shadows at the bottom of his little scarf. So if you just use a very light wash, you can get some little shadows in there. Okay, I think I'm quite happy with her. I like her. And I think this is just perfect. Of course, you know, I could keep going in, adding in those depth, but you really don't have to. So you can even turn this off now if you don't, you're fine with yours. I just keep adding layers, keep adding darker layers where I think I want to have it. But sometimes you just got to know when to stop, right, guys? I love painting so much. Sometimes I miss that, and I will just keep going and going and going, and then all of a sudden I have a mess. But so just know when to stop. Stop before you think you need to stop. There we go. Okay, now I am really stopping because I don't want to ruin her. I'm just blending that line. Okay, there we go. I think she is perfect. I hope she looks wonderful next to your other little handsome guy. And I will share the drawing in, oh, look, I got splatters up here. I will share the drawing in, just pick those up. Now, if I would have seen those when I did them, I could have picked them up easier. Although I'll tell you, this pink colors, red colors, they do tend to stain a bit. But you know what? That doesn't bother me. I'm totally fine with that. Okay, have fun, everybody. I will put my supplies in the description if you want to know about my brushes and my paper and things like that. And I always try and give you a higher or mid-level supply, and then also give you, you know, a student grade, but that's still a good paper, which is the Artisto. I think is fantastic. All right, everybody, have a great day and happy holidays.